Fraud Prevention 101, the definitive guide to keeping you safe and sound. Presented by Golden Providers. Golden Providers are top industry professionals in real estate, assisted living, senior care, and so much more. Visit us online at goldenproviders.com.
Okay, so what has been talked about most this morning already is frauds and exploitation by people that are strangers to us. What Lisa and I want to talk to you about is, number one, we want to talk about how to stay at home safely, how to protect yourself, but more of what we run into as guardians and case managers is exploitation and fraud by people that we know or people that we thought we trusted. And so we want to touch on that a little bit. First, we're going to talk about the happy things like how to stay at home. And so looking at a scenario maybe with a husband and a wife where there's a spouse that's the caregiver or possibly another family member, first and foremost, the absolute most important message that I want to share with you today is to make sure that you have your advanced directives in place. Make sure that you have someone that you trust designated as your advocate, whether it's your durable power of attorney, whether it's a healthcare surrogate, someone that can make a decision for you medically when you can't, either by incapacity or illness or something. It could be a short-term problem that you need to have someone make medical decisions for you, or it could be a long-term issue. So please, please, please make sure those things are in place. If you have wishes about how not only you want to live your life, but how you want to die, please also get those wishes documented. There's a document called 5 Wishes. It's a great way to begin that dialogue. There's a do not resuscitate. If you don't sign it while you have capacity, someone else is going to make that decision for you. So please, please, please get those things in place. Next, as a way to be as safe as possible at home is to bring in consultants if necessary, or if you can still do it on your own, do a home safety evaluation. Make sure that you have the right equipment, the right ramps, the right height on a walker, the right grab rails in place, the right security in place to remain at home as safely as possible. There are cameras that can be put in the home, very inexpensive now. It used to be a very expensive option, but you can have cameras at home. You can set up Alexa to call your family member. So there are very inexpensive tools that can be put in the home for as long as that remains safe and appropriate. Typically, when one spouse is the caregiver, there can become some challenges, and I'd like Lisa to touch on some of the things that we see.
What we see when the spouse is a caregiver, that after a while there could be some caregiver burnout. They're doing all the laundry, all the cooking, all the shopping, all the taking care of the person, probably up with them during the night when the spouse isn't sleeping well. So that person gets really burnt out, and what we find is that they get kind of prideful, they feel like they can handle it all, and they're not asking for help. And then as they get burnt out, they're more tired, they're fatigued, they're a little shorter tempered, they're not maybe giving as much love and attention to the person that they should be. And there's some great support teams out there. Dr. Visa has a program right next to her building on Palm Bay, Center for Family Caregivers, has a great support group. But I really encourage, if you know a spouse that's taking care of their loved one, really encourage them to get some support. Maybe have one of their kids come stay with the parent for a while so that they can go get a break. So important for their mental health. What else?
Another resource is sometimes people bring in hospice too late. People think of hospice as the very end of life, but palliative care is a wonderful approach, and it brings nursing, doctors, CNAs in to help with bathing and but oftentimes it's brought in too late. So think about that a year or maybe even 2 years out, when it may just be some extra helping hands in the home to keep that person home longer. Most people say they want to die at home, and so there are things that can be done. The problem is when a crisis arrives. So we want to try and avert a crisis long before it happens, having a plan.
Some of the other things we could have, in-home services come in. Caregivers come in maybe a couple hours a day to give the caregiver a break. We have nursing in-home services that'll come visit out and do the medication management, take that burden off of the shoulder of the caregiver. Having nursing come in and help. They'll come in whether it's once a week, once a month. They'll work it out with the family. That has been a great asset because you're managing all these bottles, and if they have any vision problems, I mean, it could be a nightmare. And polypharmacy, where they're going to different doctors and making sure that these medicines aren't interacting. It's so important to have outside agency maybe come in and manage the medicines.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, and I brought an example of just something that we try to utilize with some of our clients. Please make sure that there's a good, current, updated med list in the house at all times. Some of the pharmacies will pre-plan the medication so that if vision is an issue or a little bit of forgetfulness or some cognitive decline, put the responsibility on the pharmacy to pre-plan. These are Skittles, right? It's not real medications, but this is a local pharmacy that does free delivery to the home in 1 or 2 week packs at a time. They're all laid out by what day, but the description, this is something that can easily be brought to the emergency room. The EMTs, paramedics can bring this in the ambulance, but it describes what the medication looks like, what color it is, who prescribed it, which doctor, and what it's been prescribed for. So great tool, and it's free. So those are available, but it seems as though most people don't know about them. So we've now, that it's a wonderful option when people consider care in the home. But when someone doesn't want to spend that money or have a stranger, say, in their home, or loved ones aren't the dependable caregivers that they need, what we see too often is self-neglect and isolation. People driving that should not be driving anymore. So when someone's home alone, really looking for those warning signs on when they really need some extra help in the house. Again, their objective is to remain at home as long as possible. So that's an area that we want to keep an eye out for some of those red flags. Next, we want to jump into the next progression is, okay, so they've agreed to bring in some help. Well, there's different kinds of help that can come in. You can hire an agency that has licensed, credentialed caregivers, home health aides, or even CNAs that can help with some hands-on care, can help with dressing and showers, medication reminders, that sort of thing. They have been certified, and agencies do the background checks and scheduling if a caregiver can't be there on a particular day or had an emergency arise. The burden is on them to make sure that they put a different caregiver in place so there aren't gaps in the care. Another option, though, is hiring privately, and which they can do, but caution is there, red flags are there, but you want to make sure that some safety measures are put in place. There could also be payroll issues. Even though you're hiring privately, you may still be subject to paying for overtime, or you may still be subject to having to compute payroll taxes, and sometimes that's just more than some people can handle in their own homes. So some of the red flags, let's talk about how to really make sure that safety measures are in place, and some of it's been discussed, but in your own home, you want to make sure that your assets are protected. Making sure that your bank statements and your checkbooks and your credit cards and debit cards aren't in places that are easily accessible. We really want to believe that we can trust the caregivers that we've engaged to be in our home. But unfortunately, even some of the best people turn out to be untrustworthy. And so it really can open up to a lot of exposure to risk. We've had great success using, so there may be an occasion where you need your caregiver or your loved one to run to the grocery store and pick up groceries, but you don't want to give them cash, or you don't want to give them your debit card that accesses all of the money in your bank accounts. There are a couple local banks, but there's also a online bank that can help. So what we use, TD Bank has a Go card, Regions Bank has a Now card, and then TrueLink is something that you'd have to order online, but these are reloadable debit cards where you can set the limit. If you have access to a computer, you can look at every transaction as it happens, and so it limits risk. If you've got a caregiver, you give them a card that only has $200 on it, it can never go into the negative. It can only access the $200, and you can see everything that it was used for. So that's one way that you may be able to stay independent, but allows some people to have access to a little bit of money to be able to assist you in what you need. Any jewelry that is especially valuable, titles and deeds and coins, either have a very safe place in the home or consider the expense of $100 a year safe deposit box to secure those things. When you've designated a decision maker for you in the event of an emergency, making sure that they know the contents, as long as it's someone that's trustworthy, and when they should have access to those things. If there's a court-appointed guardian, the guardian has to obtain a court order before they can access a safe deposit box. So safety measures are built in place. Watching your bank balances and credit card balances, investment accounts very closely to make sure that they haven't been accessed by someone that you shouldn't have accessed them. And before making changes to advance directives, be sure to speak with an attorney first. Don't go to the local bank and revoke, your daughter because you think she's stealing from you and you need to appoint the neighbor or someone that's become a new trusted friend. Speak to an attorney. Make sure that those changes are truly in your best interest and that you're not being coerced into something and being led down a rabbit trail where you shouldn't go. So I want to share a real life story with you about a past client of ours. And he and his wife had been married 50 years, happy as can be. He had dementia. He was definitely losing his capacity to make big decisions, but they had a plan. And they transferred a lot of assets into her name. She was the primary caregiver. She was doing a really good job taking care of him and keeping him home. However, she died unexpectedly. And that left him vulnerable. He was mostly okay staying in his routine at home, but someone that they had met a year or two before that sold antiques, and she liked antiques, so she sold antiques, showed up at the door. Unbeknownst to him, it was after she saw the obituary, so she saw that the wife had passed, but she showed up at the door, and when the husband answered the door, she asked to speak with the wife. Naturally, he broke down in tears and told him about the tragic news that she'd passed away. And this allowed her to enter the home. They sat together. They cried together. She became a wonderful confidant and friend and companion to him. And within 3 weeks, she had moved in. She moved in her special needs granddaughter. She made, with him, of course, with his permission, but realized he didn't understand fully what he was doing. They brought her past due mortgage current, made 3 months worth of mortgage payments that he agreed to because of course he would. This was his very close friend now. So it went on from there. They made some very large purchases. She did attempt to retitle his home. She missed one signature. It was notarized, it was witnessed. She needed one more witness signature and it would have gone through. This resulted in a guardianship. He was safe and sound. He did have to move. He was not safe living at home. He was too open to exploitation. But he lived several more years and he was very happy, but he trusted the wrong person as a caregiver. And she was very good at manipulating him into doing things he otherwise may not have. So be careful about who you trust. Make sure you trust the right people. And if you're not sure, consult with a professional. It's maybe worth the extra couple dollars to be sure that you're not being taken advantage of, or that you have a professional ear to run through the scenario with and see if maybe it just might be too good to be true. But stay safe at home.
And I just want to kind of wrap it up by saying, we get questioned of how we can help maybe a neighbor. We know that this person's living alone. We're a little concerned about her care. Maybe she's a recent widow, can't drive. So you know that she's, who's visiting her? Maybe she has family that's out of state. I would maybe try to go visit her. These are your neighbors. If this is your circle in your neighborhood, try to get to know your neighbors. Bring them muffins. Invite them over for dinner to make sure they are okay. We might be seeing things like maybe their utilities are getting shut off, or they're having self-neglect. They might be going outside dressed inappropriately for the weather. These are almost signs of some cognitive issues that are starting to happen, so that puts them even more at risk. So just check on people. If you're not sure, call the Adult Protective Services. They will go out there and do a well check on them and make sure that they're okay, that their finances are okay, they're not at risk.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Fraud Prevention 101, the definitive guide to keeping you safe and sound, presented by Golden Providers. Golden Providers are top industry professionals in real estate, assisted living, senior care, and so much more. Visit us online at goldenproviders.com.